In the border town, a horde of demonic beasts charged toward the wall with ferocious intent. The well-trained soldiers were unfazed by the onslaught, having battled such creatures many times before. The once thought invincible demonic beasts were reduced to mere savage animals in the face of their disciplined defense. Vainer held his spear steady, ready to pierce the body of an infected wolf charging toward him. With practiced precision, he impaled the beast and sent it tumbling down from the walls. This had become second nature to the soldiers, their movements and instincts honed to perfection through countless battles. The demonic beasts had been relentlessly attacking the walls for the past few hours, yet the soldiers stood firm. Vainer surveyed the men guarding the walls with pride, realizing that in just a matter of months, His Highness had transformed these men into formidable warriors capable of defending against the most fearsome of foes. Once, only the knights from the Canggu stronghold had been able to hold off such a relentless assault, but now these soldiers were proving to be equally capable, if not much better. In the distance, a menacing hybrid creature appeared, but the men remained unflustered. Everything was proceeding according to plan, as they lay in wait for the beast to fall into their trap. Lightning took up her position, poised and ready for action. Suddenly, a soldier shouted that the hybrid was within range. Roland barked orders, commanding everyone to prepare for battle. Lightning began hurling rocks at the creature, expertly luring it in her direction. The beast was enraged and started chasing after Lightning, while Nightingale guided Anna in the shadow dimensions. Anna materialized from a portal, summoning her powers to engulf the beast in flames. In a matter of seconds, the hybrid was reduced to nothing but a pile of dust. Without warning, the other demonic beasts suddenly retreated, bewildered by the unusual turn of events. A soldier pointed to the sky, where the clouds were dissipating, giving way to warm beams of sunlight. This signaled the end of the month of the demons, and the soldiers breathed a collective sigh of relief. Shortly after the decisive victory, Roland stood on a podium, gazing out at his proud soldiers. He announced that the month of the demons had officially ended, and the crowd erupted in excitement and cheers. Everyone was screaming, "Long live His Highness!" glorifying Roland for his unwavering leadership. Roland then took a moment to praise the bravery and heroism of his soldiers, commending them for their valiant efforts in protecting their town against the demonic beasts. Despite the Canggu stronghold's attempts to force the border town into submission through starvation, the town's victory had proven that they could stand on their own. With great pride, Roland announced from this day forward, the first day after the month of the demons would officially be known as Victory Day. A grand banquet and feast would be held in the town to celebrate their hard-earned triumph. Axe lit the ceremonial fire, igniting the start of the celebration. People flooded the streets, dancing and singing with joy, holding hands and reveling in the glory of their victory. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and the aroma of delicious food, as the people of the border town basked in the aftermath of their hard-won battle. Roland felt a sense of pride and satisfaction as he gazed upon the lively celebration in the town. He knew that this victory would not only mark the end of the month of demons but also the beginning of a new era for the people of the border town. As the days pass, this Victory Day celebration would become a beloved tradition, a reminder of the town's resilience and bravery in the face of adversity. With a smile on his face, Roland made his way back to his private garden where a feast was waiting for him. The witches, who had played a vital role in the victory against the demonic beasts, were there to greet him. The aroma of the delicious food filled the air, and Roland could not help but feel grateful for the company of such beautiful group of witches. As the night wore on, the group continued to enjoy their private feast. Anna used her magic to cook the chicken to perfection, while Nanawa eagerly awaited her food. Nightingale displayed her impressive knife skills as she sliced through the beef, earning praise from Wendy. Meanwhile, Lightning indulged in the sweet fruit wine, but Wendy warned her not to overdo it. Roland couldn't help but smile at the camaraderie and joy in the air. Suddenly, Lightning surprised him by sneaking up behind him and planting a kiss on his cheek. Roland blushed furiously, unsure how to react. Lightning explained that in her hometown, it was tradition for girls to take the initiative and kiss the Lord to celebrate a victory. She wondered if Grey Castle had a similar tradition. Roland coughed, trying to regain his composure and diffuse the awkward situation. He suggested that Lightning was drunk and needed to rest. But Lightning protested, claiming she had never lost a drinking competition before. Roland looked to Anna for help, and she simply smiled, enjoying the light-hearted moment. As the festivities drew to a close, Roland headed back to his residence. He had indulged in some extra drinks, and the inky night sky was illuminated by the faint light of the moon seeping in through the windows. Roland found himself faced with a solitary figure in the hallway. He took a few tentative steps towards her and met her gaze, attempting to reassure her that the events of the evening had been a mere accident. Anna, however, surprised Roland with her response. She wasn't here to interrogate him about what had transpired earlier. Instead, she admitted that, unlike Lightning, it is impossible for her to fathom doing anything so daring in front of everyone. Thus, she waited for Roland. Roland's heart skipped a beat after hearing Anna's confession. The two each took an extra step forward, coming closer together. Roland lowered himself, while Anna tipped her toes. Roland looked deep into Anna's eyes and leaned in slowly. The two could sense each other's warm breath against their face. With a nervous look on both faces, the world around them faded away as they shared this special moment. His lips brushing gently against hers. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they pulled away from each other, their faces flushed and their hearts beating fast. Anna bid Roland good night and quickly disappeared into the hallway. Late in the night, Wendy leaned against the headboard, flipping through the book in her hand. For her, this was a rare moment of leisure, one that she never would have dared to imagine during her time in the Witch Association. As she started reading the book, she felt odd that it never mentioned anything about the god's name, and replaced every successor with just using Pope. It almost felt like one person was involved with everything throughout history. It doesn't make sense, it almost seems like they were deliberately downplaying everything. Wendy said before being interrupted by the sudden appearance of Nightingale. Wendy closed the book and welcomed Nightingale with a gentle smile. Nightingale rubbed her own neck, looking exhausted as she had just walked Manhwa home. Nightingale asked how Lightning was doing and mentioned that she seemed to have had quite a few drinks tonight. Wendy smiled and said that Lightning had fallen asleep as soon as she lay on her bed, muttering and calling for her father repeatedly. After all, Lightning is still just a kid, Wendy added. Nightingale turned to face Wendy and snatched the book out of her hands, telling her that His Highness had said that reading books at night was bad for the eyes. Nightingale then lay down on Wendy's bed and stared at the ceiling. Wendy was quick to pick up on Nightingale's strange behavior and asked if what Lightning did during the festival was the reason for her reaction. Nightingale's face turned slightly red as she stuttered out a denial, but Wendy chuckled and then took on a more serious tone. She reminded Nightingale that their mission was to help Prince Roland ascend to the throne and become the king of Grey Castle. Wendy was confident that Roland would rule the kingdom justly and provide a safe haven for all their sisters. However, Wendy also knew that, as a king, Roland would eventually have to marry a daughter of a prestigious duke's family or someone of similar status. Wendy's gaze fell on Nightingale as she said this, reminding her that they were witches and unable to bear children. Wendy's expression turned to one of despair as she explained that witches were born with unimaginable power but at the cost of their ability to give birth. Nightingale understood that this was a fate she would have to accept for the rest of her life. As a group of soldiers cleaned the pavement, some of them reminisced about their mission to defend against the month of demons, which had now been successfully completed. Many were likely to return to their previous work in the mines, but they already missed the thrill of being in the militia and the fat paychecks. Venner, their leader, reassured them that the team would not disband. However, one of the squad members couldn't help but wonder what the point of keeping them around was now that the month of demons was over. Venner's gaze shifted to Roland's residence, a knowing look in his eyes. He knew that they would have their answer tomorrow. The next morning, the sound of the gathering horn brought all the soldiers together. Axe, their commanding officer, stood before them and delivered the news that it was His Highness's decision to reassemble them. He declared that the soldiers had accomplished their first mission successfully, defending the border town against the demonic beasts. After 3 months and 6 days of arduous battle, their bravery had been acknowledged by His Highness. From that day forward, the civilian militia would officially become His Highness's personal army. The soldiers cheered and exchanged excited whispers, thrilled to continue their service under His Highness. Axe's words instilled in them a sense of pride and purpose, knowing that their efforts had not gone unnoticed. Axe turned to face the group, his commanding presence radiating as he spoke. "Does anyone here want to quit now?" he asked, his voice steady and unwavering. One of the men raised his hand tentatively and posed a question. "What exactly is a regular personal army?" he asked. "Does it mean that His Highness will confer a knighthood upon us?" Axe paused for a moment, considering his response carefully before delivering it with authority. "A regular personal army is a true army," he explained. "Their mission is to engage in real military activities, with the sole purpose of protecting His Highness and his territory. Simply put, you will become professional soldiers, training day and night, season after season, to achieve the ultimate victory." Suddenly, another voice pierced through the crowd, questioning the need for a personal army when they were already engaged in military activities. "What's the difference?" he asked. Axe didn't skip a beat in his response. "The difference," he replied, "is that there will be more frequent training, a more stringent system, and more rewarding benefits." As soon as Axe mentioned the prospect of more rewards, a palpable buzz of excitement swept through the crowd. People started clamoring to know more, eager to find out what exactly they stood to gain. Axe put his hands together and gazed intently at the crowd, his tone serious and resolute. "A professional army will introduce a formal military rank system," he explained. "Those who excel in combat will have the opportunity to rise in the ranks, even becoming officers like myself. And with that rank comes a fat paycheck and a land of your own." The group of men was buzzing with excitement and anticipation, but Axe's words served as a sobering reminder of the serious nature of their mission. "I want to make it clear," he began, his tone firm and unwavering. "The system we will institute must be followed without exception. From this point forward, the rules will be different. Any failures to complete missions, acts of desertion, mutiny, or acts of treason, as well as other violations, will not be tolerated." The men listened attentively, their excitement tempered by the gravity of Axe's warning. "The punishment for such violations will be severe," he continued. "It will no longer be a matter of losing an egg for lunch. Depending on the severity of the violation, the punishment could range from discharge, servitude, jail time, or even death by hanging." The room fell silent as Axe's words sank in, the men fully comprehending the seriousness of their commitment. Just 3 months ago, none of them would have even considered staying here, with land, money, and other material possessions seeming meaningless in the face of the constant danger they faced. But now, they had made the choice to stay, and the prospect of fighting for His Highness had given them a newfound sense of purpose. Compared to the endless drudgery of mining, spending their days with rocks and stones, fighting for a greater cause felt like the right thing to do. But then, Axe's sly grin broke the tension, and he let out a booming laugh. "Make no mistake," he declared triumphantly. "You are all now part of His Highness's regular army." The men erupted into cheers and whoops of excitement, slapping each other on the back and exchanging congratulations. Axe wasted no time in getting down to business, quickly announcing the first training of the day, wilderness training. Back in Roland's office, Lightning inquired about the training session for the regular army, while the thick blanket of snow outside the border town persisted. The snowfall had been sporadic for 3 months and had now accumulated up to knee level. The soldiers were practically crawling in the snow rather than running. The snow that seeped into their boots had melted, soaking their feet. Despite standing in the sun, most people were still shivering from the frigid cold, and the enormous physical effort only amplified the chill, causing many to fall behind. Roland knew that he can't be too hasty and impatient, he needed to take his time with the regular army's training.
While Lightning and Nightingale were excited to see the new blueprint on Roland's table, the specific organization, rules and regulations, and rewards and punishments are the problems that give him a headache.
He had completely forgotten about the military chess that he played during childhood. He simply decided to make up the details himself. After all, he was the creator of the new style army, and if the settings were unreasonable, no one would notice. As a result, the first military organization of the border town was quickly formed. The overall framework was composed of corps, division, battalion, company, squad, and soldier.
Looking at the blueprint,
it was the new bayonet that Roland is looking to implement into the army. Suddenly, the door was knocked and Nightingale quickly evaded into the darkness with Lightning. Barif came to inform that a noble from the Changji stronghold would like to meet Roland. Turned out, the noble was Cornelius Baron, who fled during the month of the demons and returned, who had his house demolished as it was hindered the defense of the city wall.
And the man is here to demand an explanation.
This fat guy looks like a typical villain noble from any anime. As Roland met the fat man berated him for allowing the stonemasons to demolish his house, ranting that it had cost him 100 gold. Abruptly, his tone shifted, and he claimed that it had actually cost him 150 gold royals to construct, wildly gesticulating with his finger. Roland's sly grin betrayed his amusement as he asked if the fat man was referring to the house at the southernmost end of the town. The corpulent nobleman nodded vigorously, and Roland locked eyes with him, expressing his regret that it had impeded the passage of his subordinates, but the municipal hall had already made amends for it. The fat man stuttered and asked how much compensation he would receive, to which Roland held up 2 fingers and said,
20 gold royals.
Though the fat man tried to argue that it was too little, he eventually relented, wiping the sweat off his forehead and inquiring where he could collect the money. Roland pretended to look puzzled, as he informed the fat man that the rightful owner of the house had already been compensated. In a fit of rage, the fat man stood up and slammed his hands on the table, yelling that he was the rightful owner. Roland raised an eyebrow and calmly pointed out that he had never seen the man all winter, and therefore, he couldn't claim ownership of the house. The fat man didn't hesitate to retort that he had returned to the Changu stronghold, as he didn't want to face the demonic beasts in this messy place. Roland rolled his eyes, thinking that the corpulent man was a complete idiot, but he kept his voice even as he asked, "So you abandoned your lord and fled because you were afraid of the demonic beasts, is that right?" As the bombshell dropped, Carter moved forward and pushed the corpulent man back into his seat. Roland rose from his chair and looked down at the corpulent man with disdain, giving him 2 options: admit that the house didn't belong to him and be let go, or confess to deserting his lord and face charges of defection, which carried a death sentence by hanging. Beads of sweat dripped down Cornelius's forehead as he stuttered and ultimately admitted that he had made a mistake and the house didn't belong to him. Roland grinned with satisfaction and motioned to the guard to accompany Cornelis out. But just before Cornelis could leave, Roland halted him and tasked him to deliver a message to all the nobles who had committed the same error as he had. They too had the same 2 options, and if they chose not to accept the second one, they needn't bother returning. Cornelius went silent for a second and forced a smile as he stepped out, but in that instant, as he turned around, Roland saw his gritted teeth expression. Cornelius exited the border town and slammed his hand on a nearby tree trunk. With the guard not around, he released his frustration and anger, cursing at Roland. Just as he is returning to the Changji stronghold, he brushed past a cloaked figure. It was no other than Leaf from the Witch Association. At first, there was nothing unusual about it.
Among the townspeople coming and going, women dressed like this were common.
But when a gust of wind blew up the corner of the woman's hood, the fat man felt his heart skip a beat, and the air around him seemed to freeze. She had a rare and stunning head of emerald green hair, and just the momentary glimpse of her face was enough to be considered peerless. Even in the capital city of Grey Castle, she would outshine those so-called princesses and socialites. How could someone like her so beautiful appear in a border town like this, he asked himself. As Leaf was about to enter the town, she felt odd to see that people here were much more energetic and happy, even though they had just faced the month of the demons. For a moment, she was more curious about the lord who was governing this place. As she ventured into the bustling town,
the castle loomed large on the horizon, an unmistakable landmark that made sneaking in unnoticed an impossible feat. She did not have abilities like Nightingale to conceal her senses and become totally stealthy, so after careful consideration, Leaf decided that it was better to walk into the castle openly rather than hide and sneak around. She had already made the worst-case scenario if Nightingale really betrayed the Witch Association. Although Leaf is confident that she could escape the two guards, but she had a slim chance of escaping from Nightingale, she took a deep breath and strides forward. As she approached closer, the guards quickly noticed her and placed their hands on their sword hilts, shouting loudly at her in rebuke, informing her that this is the prince's residence, and if she requires help, she need to seek help at the municipal building. Disregarding their warnings, Leaf took another deep breath and pulled back her hood. As expected, she saw the two guards express surprise simultaneously. Before they could recover, she spoke bluntly, admitting that she is a witch. As Leaf braced herself for the worst, the guards exchanged a brief glance, but to her surprise, their expressions betrayed none of the expected animosity that most people reserved for witches. Instead, one of them even offered to help her. Despite the rush of excitement, this unexpected reaction ignited in her chest. Leaf kept her composure and spoke in the calmest voice she could muster, requesting to see Nightingale, Anna, or Manhua. One of the guards turned and disappeared through the gate to report to his superiors. Leaf watched him go, her mind racing with a million possibilities of what awaited her inside the castle walls. Would she be greeted with open arms by her sisters, or would she fall into a trap laid by the guards? Perhaps Anna and Manhua were nothing more than imaginary figures. But just as she was lost in thought, time seemed to stand still, or maybe it was just a fleeting moment when she heard the voice of Nightingale. She thought she must have misheard. Suddenly, two familiar figures emerged from behind the door and rushed towards her. Almost simultaneously, she was enveloped in a warm hug. Both of the girls welcomed her home. Leaf's eyes began to well up again, biting her lip as she wiped away the tears that threatened to spill over. With a gentle nod, she hugged both of her sisters. Moments later, Roland let out a deep yawn as he settled back into his office. He had expected Nightingale to walk in any minute, but to his surprise, it was Wendy who entered with a tray of freshly brewed coffee. She explained that Nightingale had gone out to greet the visiting sisters from the Witch Association. Roland nodded absent-mindedly as he took the coffee cup from her, clearly failing to catch on. But as he was about to take a sip, something Wendy said made him freeze. "What sisters?" he exclaimed, suddenly alert. Wendy hesitated before delivering the devastating news. The sisters had not found the holy mountain, and their journey had been fraught with danger and heavy casualties. Only 7 of them had managed to survive. Wendy apologized for acting on her own authority to take the witches in before informing Roland of their arrival. Wendy softly said that all of the witches that came were not combat-type witches. Roland was filled with anticipation. He knew that under the constraints of the god's punishment stone, witches had limited combat abilities, and their area of expertise lay in production. If there were a witch with the ability to produce electricity, the remote border towns could be as bright as day at night or be able to solve the problem of rough processing and enter the era of mass production. Then he'd hit the real jackpot. Then the next step will be becoming the king, marrying witches, achieve modernization, and reach the pinnacle of life. Just thinking about it sends a shiver down his spine. Well, I agree with Roland on this one, do you? Nightingale softly coughed twice, waking up Roland from his imagination. Nightingale and the remaining witches returned to the castle. And Roland had prepared a sumptuous dinner in the castle hall as a welcoming feast. But seemed like this was the first time the girls had seen such a feast and a prince this up close. Everyone appears to be very restrained. Roland regained his composure and introduced himself to the newcomers. He welcomed them and hoped they would enjoy the dinner. He also insisted that the girls make themselves at home here. The room was silent, but lightning being lightning, smoothly got rid of the awkwardness and started the feast. Roland took a sip of his wine, while enthusiastically admiring the group of women before him, each with a different style but all beautiful in their own way. This was the greatness of magic. Yo Ram, is that you? After dinner, the prince finally came to the long-awaited segment, the ability inquiry. Manhwa helped Roland to gather information about the newcomers and their abilities. Although there isn't anyone with the ability to generate electricity, they were still treasured by Roland. Leaf's first ability can be used to improve fruits and seeds, increasing their yield and growth. Great for the development of agriculture. Scroll, the oldest among the girls, her main ability is an extraordinary memory, which can almost be called photographic memory. At the same time, she has obtained an interesting secondary ability. Books can be temporarily materialized after she has read them. A natural educator. The third witch is named Hummingbird, a short but cute witch, just as her nickname suggests. Her ability is to make objects lighter. By attaching magic to an object, she can significantly reduce its weight, almost to the point of being zero, great for transportation. The fourth witch, who is rare to have a surname, is named Soraya Zoan and comes from a merchant family in the capital city of Grey Castle. She has short curly brown hair and a pair of slender eyes. The freckles on her nose not only do not detract from her overall beauty but also give her a unique youthful vitality. She is 19 years old, and her ability can draw people and scenery she sees or imagines realistically. With her branch ability, Magic Pen, she can draw images like photographs without the need for pigments or paper, basically a human camera. The fifth witch was named Echo, a tall woman with a coffee-colored skin tone and typical sand people features in her eyes and nose. She exuded an exotic feel from her homeland in the far south. Her initial ability after awakening was to mimic the sounds of animals, but as she matured, she became able to imitate any sound with remarkable accuracy. Lily, the sixth witch to be interviewed, is only 16 years old with 2 ponytails and a doll-like face. She can prevent food from spoiling. She awakened as a witch only a year ago and has become the most popular member of the Witch Association. Without the preservation ability, many foods would spoil and become moldy during their exile. Spoiler alert, remember this girl, her ability is extremely OP. Tell me in the comments section what you think her ability is capable of. Lastly, this Rem-like girl is Mystery Moon. At the time she walked into the office, she looked very nervous. Nightingale had to comfort her for a while. As it turned out, Mystery Moon's ability was seen as one of the worst in the camp and she was only responsible for some simple manual labor. Plus, she was often scolded by the mentor, which made her act timidly, afraid that Roland would think she was useless and drive her out of Border Town. Her main ability is to magnetize objects. Before reaching adulthood, her ability was limited to metallic objects, but after becoming an adult, any object in her hands can obtain magnetism. He thanked Faraday, Gauss, Ampere, and Maxwell in his heart for the knowledge that magnetism produces electricity and electricity produces magnetism was a well-known fact to any engineering enthusiast. He knew that a new miracle will soon be happening in the Border Town. Roland found that just categorizing witches' abilities simply by combat and non-combat does not make any sense. He then categorizes their ability into 3 major groups. First is the self-enhancement type, like a passive ability and not affected by the God Punishment Stone. Like Scroll's ability, for example. Second is summoning type. The ability's characteristic is that magical power can leave the user's body and take effect independently, and it is not affected by the God Punishment Stone. However, once the ability is activated, the resulting effects are permanent and irreversible. Most of the witches are in this category. The third type is enchantment type. The way of casting magic is through contact with the target, and the conversion process is slow and consumes a lot of magic. It can also be interrupted by the God Punishment Stone. However, once the conversion is complete, it becomes the inherent property of the object and remains effective even in anti-magic areas. Enchantments also have a limited duration and are not permanent. This applies to the abilities of that Mystery Moon and Hummingbird have.